This is Tony Franklin here. Well, where's he from? Was the firm with Jimmy Page and Paul Rogers back in the big head days? You just play that rock and roll with Joe Kay. Okay?
Oh yeah, just call me Joe, and I can play that rock and roll for you.
The other interesting song in this record is interesting for a couple of reasons, and I'm going to play you the first reason now. Let's see if you recognize the guitar riff on this. Sounds a little familiar, right? If you've ever heard his song Fly Like an Eagle, you should know that that's the same riff. Steve was not afraid to recycle his own work if he felt there was a spot where it could be used. And I think that was just a really good riff that he had and maybe was saving for the right song. And I think he had good reason to think that this might be the right song and this might be a huge hit, because this song, called My Dark Hour, is a collaboration, perhaps his most famous collaboration, even more so than the Chuck Berry record, because the guy who helped record My Dark Hour is none other than Paul McCartney. Yeah, Steve's got a track with one of the Beatles. I talked about Glyn Johns just a moment ago. Steve was able to meet the Beatles through Glyn Johns, and apparently they were fans. George Harrison in particular was a early Steve Miller fan. So in 2016, Steve was on the Howard Stern show, and Howard asked him about this song and what it was like recording with McCartney. And Steve said, "We started playing and really kicking it out. We did this tune called My Dark Hour. This was the moment I got it made." And that sounds about right. You know, you're a young up-and-coming artist working on your third album, and you get to release a track with one of the Beatles, you know, a guy who was in the biggest band in the world at the time. Like this era, the late 60s, it was the end of the Beatles run, but they were as popular as ever. So this was a really interesting collaboration. But there's an interesting story behind it, too. It sort of came accidentally. Paul, at the time, was fighting with the rest of the Beatles, and this song was sort of born out of a therapeutic jam session. The story goes that Paul was just hanging out in a recording studio. You know, Steve came in, they, started talking, and Steve asked to borrow the studio, and Paul said, "Sure, but, you got to let me play on this track, let me help you put this together." And, of course, Steve agreed. There's a book called Many Years From Now by a guy named Barry Miles, in which Paul McCartney tells the story like this. And, oh yes, I'm going to do the voice. "Steve Miller happened to be in there recording late at night, and he just breezed in. 'Hey, what's happening, man? Can I use the studio?' 'Yeah,' I said, 'but can I drum for you? I just had a fucking unholy argument with the guys there. I explained it to him. Took 10 minutes to get it off my chest. So I did a track. He and I stayed that night and did a track of his called My Dark Hour. I thrashed everything out on the drums. There's a surfeit of aggressive drum fills, and that's all I can say about that. We stayed until late. I played bass, guitar, and drums, and sang backing vocals. It's actually a pretty good track. It was a very strange time in my life, and I swear I got my first gray hairs that month." Okay, I'm sorry for that awful Paul McCartney impression, but sometimes I can't help myself, and you sort of get the gist. Steve was in the right place at the right time, and he found Paul in the right mood, which was a bad mood. And, Paul took his aggression sort of out on the song, and it sounds great. So I'm going to play another clip of that. Like I said, this is a song I really enjoy, and It's too bad it wasn't a hit, but at the same time, it's sort of good it wasn't a hit. It's sort of good that it wasn't a hit because Steve was able to recycle that riff for, if we're being honest, a better song, My Dark Hour is a good track. Fly Like an Eagle's a masterpiece. It's good that we were able to hear both of those.
Hope you're doing great, and best of luck with your new podcast, Rock the World with It.